Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed News Corner. Been a few weeks since we've run one of these episodes on the channel, but yeah, I've been busy benchmarking a whole range of laptop CPUs and GPUs, some of which we've already talked about and some of which we'll be able to talk about soon. But this week has been quite an interesting one for hardware news, and for once, it's not entirely dominated by talk of human malware, so let's get into some of the big stories. So this first story is no doubt generating some interest among the AMD fans out there who are desperate for news on AMD's next generation CPUs. According to DigiTimes via Tom's Hardware and citing unnamed motherboard makers, AMD is set to unveil their Zen 3 based Ryzen 4000 CPUs around September of this year. The DigiTimes report suggests that AMD were originally going to reveal these Ryzen 4000 processors at Computex in May, which, due to human malware, has now been postponed to September if it ever goes ahead. DigiTimes then go on to say that this has led to Ryzen 4000 CPUs also being delayed until around September or so. Just to put it out there, we don't believe that this report is accurate, and it seems that Computerbase have heard the same things. Computerbase say that Computex was never going to be the launch of Ryzen 4000, aside from perhaps some initial information similar to what AMD showed at CES in January of 2019. Likewise, we believe AMD was going to focus primarily on other launches for around the Computex time period, which seemed to still be on track even though the show isn't going ahead at that point anymore. Anyway, launching new CPUs around Computex would also directly contradict AMD's public statements on Zen 3. They've said a few times now that new Ryzen 4000 processors for the desktop aren't expected until late 2020. This could still mean around that September timeframe. A lot of hardware manufacturers like to launch stuff around then in the lead up to the holiday season, but the exact date or even month is still up in the air at this point. Computerbase even say if it ends up launching around the new Computex time, that would be a coincidence and not because AMD has delayed the CPUs to match the delay for Computex. We know a lot of you are excited for what AMD will be bringing with Zen 3 technology later this year, but unfortunately we don't really have any confirmed information to share at this point. There's still plenty of rumors floating around about IPC increases in the 10 to 15% range, although I'm sure we'll find out exactly what those processors will be later in this year. But as for this particular report flagging September as the exact time frame and it being delayed from middle of the year, as far as we're aware, that's not actually accurate. Next up, we have a whole bunch of leaks surrounding Intel's upcoming 10th gen processors. It seems that we've had an unusually large amount of leaks for these Comet Lake S processors. These CPUs have been, a long time coming, and Intel hasn't been able to stop the flow of information. At this point, we basically have all the information on what these processors will look like before they are launched officially. Video cards have obtained some marketing slides for 10th gen processors that, along with information from El Chapuzas Informatico, give us the specifications for essentially the entire lineup. While we haven't seen any official information on what these processors will be, this is basically what we expect to happen. Not going to go through all these parts because that would take forever, and you can see there are multiple variants of everything. There's K models, KF models, F models, and there's even low power T models that aren't listed here on video cards. In no surprise at this point, the flagship parts will be 10 cores in the Core i9 series, then for Core i7 there'll be 8 cores, Core i5 will be 6 cores, and surprisingly Intel still thinks selling quad-core Core i3 models is a good idea. All parts do have hyperthreading enabled though, which differs to previous generations that had hyperthreading locked on everything but the Core i9 parts. Aside from this, we can expect 125 watt TDPs for the K and KF models all the way down to the 6-core Core i5 parts, although, as we know, this isn't an accurate reflection of power consumption for Intel's desktop CPUs. While the 10-core Core i9 10900K can likely hit its 3.7 GHz base clock across 10 cores within 125 watts, if you are wanting to sit more up at that 4.8 GHz all-core turbo, you'll be facing much greater than 125 watts of power consumption. The other interesting news here is that of thermal velocity boost, which has been a feature of Intel's processors for a few generations now. While Intel did bring this down to the Core i7 range for mobile 10th gen processors, it's being kept to just Core i9 on Comet Lake S according to video cards information. This will see the single core turbo for these parts push up to 200 MHz higher than their rated single core turbo speed. So 5.1 GHz on the 10900K becomes 5.3 GHz if you can get the chip running below a certain temperature. All alleged at this point, of course, and you can, I guess, take this with a grain of salt, but I think this is pretty much close to what we'll be seeing. The other leak from this week has been that of a Tiger Lake processor appearing in the 3D Mark database. This chip is called the Core i7-1185G7, which follows on from the Core i7-1065G7 we saw with this generation's Ice Lake. This suggests Intel will use 11th gen naming for Tiger Lake rather than jumping up to sort of a 2000 series. Aside from this, we don't know much else about what these processors will bring. I wouldn't bother reading too much into the specs shown in the listing because they often aren't representative of the final product. In any case, we should learn more about Tiger Lake later in the year. We are expecting to get U-series processors with new architecture and Xe graphics for the holiday refresh of ultra-portable laptops. AMD has killed off their StoreMI technology. AMD first launched StoreMI back in 2018 to little fanfare. I'd say it's reasonable to say. It was a neat solution to combine slow and fast storage devices into a single hybrid volume, and nice for being able to, for example, have your games automatically transferred to your SSD when you're playing them before returning to the hard drive when not in use. AMD advised people that StoreMI would no longer be available to download starting March 31st, and while people that still have StoreMI installed can continue using it, AMD will also no longer be providing technical support. Instead, AMD is set to launch a replacement solution in the second quarter of 2020. AMD suggests people either wait for this new solution or use an alternative like NModus Fuse Drive, and StoreMI itself was created through a partnership with NModus. An announcement that we haven't gotten around to discussing yet is that of Nvidia's GeForce GTX 1650 with GDDR6 memory. This is one that launched in the last week or so without a ton of noise or excitement. I mean, yeah, it is only a GTX 1650, which itself isn't that exciting, so yeah, I guess it all makes sense. Anyway, in typical Nvidia fashion, this new GDDR6 version isn't just a simple replacement of the GDDR5 memory modules on the old card with GDDR6. No, this new variant also features different clock speeds. The G5 model boosts up to 1665 MHz, while the G6 sits at 1590 MHz. So you are getting faster 12 gigabits per second memory with the G6 model on the same 128-bit bus, giving us 50% more memory bandwidth, but clock speeds have been cut by 5% on the 896 CUDA core array. Pricing for these GDDR6 cards is expected to be the same as the GDDR5 models at around $150 US, and really they can't go any higher given the GTX 1650 Super is sitting there at $160 already with GDDR6 and more CUDA cores with higher clock speeds. Like a lot of Nvidia GPU launches, there are plenty of problems with the GTX 1650 GDDR6. The naming is the big one. This is a card that performs differently to the standard GTX 1650, but has mostly the same name. Some manufacturers are taking to adding D6 to the end of the product listings, but this can easily be lost among the sea of other codes and words added to most store pages. Other manufacturers are sticking to just advertising the product as having GDDR6 in this title with no D6 suffix at all. For example, this is the page for the MSI GeForce GTX 1650 Gaming X model with GDDR5 memory, and this is the listing for the same card with GDDR6 memory. Same price, one has better memory, and in a title that has over 20 different words in it, if you miss the D6 that's shoved in there or the GDDR6 memory, you'd have no idea what model you were buying. It also doesn't make much sense to bother refreshing the GTX 1650. I mean, the GTX 1650 Super is a far superior product. It's available for nearly the same price. In many instances, it's just $10 to $20 more for nearly 40% more performance. I have heard some reasoning that Nvidia may be offering a GDDR6 variant as they have more supply of those memory modules, or they ran out of GDDR5 or whatever, but to me it'd make more sense just to can the product entirely and stick with the 1650 Super. But yeah, now we have this confusing D5 and D6 situation like with what we've been getting for the past few years with these Nvidia cards. In other confusing Nvidia product launches, we have more information on Nvidia's refreshed RTX 2070 and RTX 2060 GPUs they're offering for the 2020 series of gaming laptops. In our announcement video that covered the new Super lineup, we also pointed out that the RTX 2070 and 2060 have been updated with new clock speeds, and in the case of the 2060, a new power target allowing some configurations to run it up to 115 watts, up from 90 watts with the previous generation. According to a representative representative from Laptop ODM Schenker XMG, part of these changes are down to the new low-voltage GDDR6 modules that are also being used with new supermodels. This gives more power budget to the GPU itself, improving performance. On top of that, new voltage regulators are also part of the package. And Notebook Checkers pointed out that these new refreshed GPUs do have different product codes, even though the public-facing names remain the same. What this means is that any laptops released in 2020 with the new variant of the RTX 2070 and 2060 will likely perform a fair bit better than previous models that used the same name, which is of course going to create confusion in the laptop market between models from 2019 and 2020 that pretty much going to coexist on the market at the same time. That's fairly common, but the 2020 models will get that new GDDR6, the new voltage regulators, and perform better. But I guess, yeah, Nvidia's never shied away from confusion for their mobile parts, so yeah, I guess that's just what we're stuck with again. And I just wanted to close out this News Corner episode by examining this statement on UserBenchmark, which recently popped up in our Twitter feed. Now, you can find this on the UserBenchmark pages for the Ryzen 7 4800HS, the 4800H, and the Ryzen 9 4900HS. So these are all the new mobile APUs that we've just been reviewing and testing comprehensively. But on UserBenchmark, they say yeah, I mean, just where would you even begin with something like that? I mean, so aside from that ridiculous statement, to be honest, embarrassing statement, I don't really know what else you'd use to describe that sort of thing. Yeah, just as I said, don't even know where to begin with that. I also did look into the person that posted this particular comment, clearly a staff member of UserBenchmark, and they've also made some other strange comments like this one. The quad-core Intel 3950KF apparently beating the Ryzen 7 3700X in gaming hands down, apparently, according to UserBenchmark, which is just... Yeah, that's an interesting claim for sure. Or you have this one about the 3700X severely bottlenecking the Nvidia GeForce RTX 2070 Super. That's another. Yeah, that's quite a claim to make. Not quite sure where you would get that information from. I'm sure that'll be news to people that have bought the 3700X and are using it with cards like an RTX 2070 Super or faster. I'm sure they'll be shocked to learn that actually, in fact, it's been severely bottlenecking their GPU, and that really you should be buying something like a 3950KF for that configuration. They've really been burnt hard on that one, going with the 8-core 16-thread processor instead of Intel's 9th generation quad-core. Yeah, really tough times for those 3700X buyers. I'm sure they'll be devastated. But yeah, of course, we are just mere incompetent more-core smearers according to their about page. So yeah, what would we know really? Userbenchmark.com. Oh. Anyway, that's enough on the userbenchmark.com stuff. I always find some of their statements just really funny, some of the stuff that they post on that website. It's quite amusing. But anyway, enough from the Hardware Unboxed News Corner for this week. As always, you can subscribe to get this segment in your inbox every Friday for the weeks that we actually do it. Didn't do it for the past couple of weeks, but I think we'll be keeping up this schedule for the next few weeks, at least as far as I can see. And it does seem like there's a few interesting hardware launches coming out throughout the next couple of months. So there'll be no shortage of content on the Hardware Unboxed channel. So yeah, definitely subscribe for all that stuff. And yeah, you can support us on our Patreon page as well. If you enjoy what we do and want to support the channel, want to get access to our Discord chat, all that sort of thing, you can sign up to our Patreon page in the description below, and I'll catch you in the next one.